Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Idahoan Show. As you're probably aware, I've been doing kind of a series lately on practical accuracy, and especially exploring how different features of a gun, like optics, can affect its practical accuracy, the ability of the shooter to actually hit stuff with it. And one of my more recent tests was comparing an AR-15 with a scout scope to one with a regular scope versus an unmagnified red dot to see if the scout scope would offer somewhat of a compromise between the two in terms of balancing the speed of the red dot with the precision of the scope. Well, it occurred to me that another option which ostensibly offers that same kind of a compromise is the LPVO. As you're probably aware, LPVO stands for Low Power Variable Optics, so it's basically just a variable power scope that goes all the way down to 1x. And so in theory, it should give you the speed advantage of an unmagnified optic when you have it set to 1x, but then if you want some magnification, you can turn it up to, in this case, as high as 4x. So what I want to do today is run this on the same course where I tested the scout scope concept. Now, I realize that this is not going to be a perfectly representative comparison to my previous test because there I was using a rifle, whereas here I've got this LPVO mounted on an AR-15 pistol with a stabilizing harness. Nevertheless, I think this will give us some useful data upon which to evaluate the LPVO concept. So, without further ado, let's get started. Well, I was able to complete the course using this AR pistol with the LPVO. And that in itself is a significant result because if you recall my previous test, I was unable to complete the long-range portion of the course using an AR carbine with an unmagnified red dot. Now, looking at my time, I noticed that the time it took me to clear the short-range portion of the stage using the LPVO was shorter than what it took me with a regular scope in the previous test, and longer than what it took me with an unmagnified red dot in that test. So I think we've substantiated our initial hypothesis that an LPVO would provide somewhat of a compromise or an intermediate solution between an unmagnified red dot that is faster at close range but not as good at long range, and a traditional scope that provides better performance at long range but is slower up close. Of course, the purpose of the previous test was to determine whether a scout scope might also offer somewhat of an intermediate solution, which it did. But the interesting thing, if we compare my time, is that I was actually able to clear both the short range and the long range portions of the course faster using the Scout Scope last time than I was today with the LPVO. So that could be taken to imply that a Scout Scope is the superior option, that, that it offers faster target acquisition both up close and at distance than, in this case, an LPVO does. That said, there were also a couple of other variables that could make up the difference. For one thing, last time I was using a carbine, this time I'm using a pistol. Maybe that's the difference, that the carbine is just faster than the pistol. So too, it could just be a matter of skill. Admittedly, I have a lot more experience shooting a rifle or carbine than I do shooting an AR pistol like this. So it could be that my skills are the deciding factor there, and I would have been slower with this regardless of what kind of sights I had on it. So I think it would be a little premature to conclude at this point that the Scout Scope offers a clear advantage over the LPVO or vice versa. What I think we can say fairly conclusively is that both those options provide a speed advantage over a traditional scope and a precision advantage over an unmagnified red dot. More particularly for this test, I would say that regardless of whether this LPVO is truly the best sighting solution for a gun like this, in my view it does provide a satisfactory compromise between speed and precision. Because I feel like, especially with a little more practice, I should be able to use this pretty quickly. And yet, it provides a significant advantage for long-range precision over an unmagnified red dot. So the gun is definitely still usable at close range, and yet it's now usable out to a much greater distance for a target of a given size than if I just had a red dot on it. Anyway, time and ammunition permitting, I definitely hope to do more testing on this kind of thing in future. But until then, thank you for watching the Idahoan Show.